Hello and welcome. Today we're jumping into a really powerful idea from author Atiq Rahimi, all based on his keynote, Words as a Pledge. And we're going to be tackling a question that has kept writers and thinkers arguing for, well, centuries.
Now, that question, it seems pretty simple, right? But underneath, this is incredibly complex debate about what art is even for, about the real power of our words, and what an artist's job is in society. So, what's the answer?
Well, the philosopher Gilles Deleuze had a pretty strong opinion on this. For him, the act of writing is always political. He's basically saying a writer is never just a writer. Nope, they are a politician, a machine, an experiment. They can't just sit on the sidelines and watch.
To really get a feel for this idea, Atiq Rahimi tells this fantastic old story from the 13th century poet Farid ud-Din Attar. So a master tells his student that a wise man's words can literally move a mountain. And the second he says it, the mountain starts to shake. The master actually has to yell at it, "Hey, I was just giving an example." It's the perfect little story for this age-old human dream, right? The dream of shaping reality with nothing but language.
Okay, so this gets us to the core of it. When does language stop just describing the world and start, actively changing it? When does saying something become the same as doing something? There's actually a name for this, a really cool concept from the philosopher J.L. Austin. He called it a performative utterance. Basically, it's a statement where the words themselves are the action. They're not just reporting on what's happening, they are the thing that's happening.
And think about it, you see this all the time. When a judge says, "I now pronounce you man and wife," boom, a new legal reality exists. When a leader says, "War is declared," a country is thrown into conflict. These aren't just words. They are actions with massive, immediate, life-altering consequences, from way back in history with religious edicts to things as serious as modern-day fatwas.
But wait a second. This brings up a really important point. Is the power really in the words themselves, or is it in the authority of the person saying them? As J.L. Austin pointed out, for these words to actually work, you need the right setup. It's not like just anyone can walk up and declare a war, right? You need legitimacy, you need authority, you need an entire system of power to make those words mean something.
You can totally see how a writer could get drunk on this idea, right? This image from Flaubert is so intense, this delirious pride and feeling like you can just rearrange the world with your sentences. But as he points out, there's a catch. First, you actually have to have something to say.
Okay, but this whole idea runs into a huge, difficult problem. If writers have something important to say, and their words can be so powerful, why doesn't the world look, well, different? This is the really uncomfortable part. We have centuries of absolute masterpieces. Books like Germinal, War and Peace, The Plague, all of them shining a bright light on injustice and human suffering. And yet, that suffering just keeps on going. So what is literature actually doing?
The thinker Maurice Blanchot really nailed this distinction. He said a novel like War and Peace, it holds the world spellbound, it totally captivates us. But a political text like Marx's Das Kapital, that's designed to physically move the world, to be a literal blueprint for change. So art mesmerizes, but political action mobilizes.
And here's where the argument gets really raw, really direct. Jean-Paul Sartre was a huge believer in politically engaged literature. But even he admitted that when you're faced with immediate, real-world suffering, like a dying child, his own famous novel, Nausea, feels, well, completely insignificant.
And, this isn't some new modern anxiety. Centuries ago, the poet Hölderlin was asking this same haunting question. When everything is falling apart, what are poets even for? What's the point of an artist?
But what if? What if we've been looking at this all wrong? Maybe literature's political power isn't about moving mountains or starting revolutions. Maybe it's about something much, much more fundamental.
Okay, let's shift gears for a second. Imagine you're living under a dictatorship. The big existential question isn't Shakespeare's to be or not to be anymore. Now it's to say or not to say. In an environment like that, any act of expression, even just being silent, becomes a political statement.
This saying, which got passed around between intellectuals in places like Poland and Afghanistan, it just lays the terrifying reality bare. Every single step you take toward expressing yourself is a step into danger. So to actually write something down and then sign your name to it, that becomes an incredible act of defiance.
So in a place like that, literature finds a whole new job. It's not a political program. Instead, as Deleuze put it so beautifully, it gives us syntax to the cry.
It takes that raw, wordless sound of human pain and suffering, and it shapes it into language. Maybe its goal isn't to wake up the powerful, but it can sure trouble their sleep.
And that points to another one of literature's most amazing functions, something Milan Kundera described perfectly. See, we each only get one life. We're born, as he says, onto a planet of inexperience. And literature is our spaceship. It's how we get to visit other lives and learn from things we've never been through ourselves.
And that's really what Salman Rushdie is getting at here. This is the ultimate power of a good story. It just kicks open the door to empathy. It lets you step inside someone else's head to see how they see, think how they think, and most importantly, feel what they feel. And that simple act of connection, well, that in itself is a deeply political act.
All right, so where does all this leave us? We've gone back and forth. We've seen the power of words to literally create reality, and we've seen how powerless they can feel. Now we're at the heart of the paradox.
First, we got to be clear on what we mean by the political mind. The poet Paul Valéry had a great definition. He said its one and only goal is to get power and to hold on to it. And to do that, it often has to use control, illusion, and what he called intellectual forgery to keep its grip.
So this sets up the final showdown, right? On one side, you've got the words of power. That's the language systems used to control people, to build fake arguments, to forge reality that serves them. But on the other side, you have the power of words, the language of literature, which is all about fighting those systems, experiencing what it's like to be someone else, and giving a voice to that human cry.
And that is how we get to the answer. It turns out, literature is at its most political not when it's trying to be a pamphlet for a political party, but when it stands apart from all of that. By refusing to play along with the forgery of the political mind, it performs its most crucial, most powerful political act.
And that brings us right back to the beginning, to the title of Rahimi's speech, Words as a Pledge. If this is literature's real political power, this deep commitment to human experience and a refusal to be controlled, then what is the promise it's making to all of us? What does it pledge to the world? That's the thought I'll leave with you. Thanks for joining me for this one.